Hey everyone, my name is Henry Yan, and thank you all for joining our Ask Me Anything session on Azure Network Security. Hope you're having a great Secure Tech Accelerator, and also you're able to catch a lot of the great sessions and things going on as part of Microsoft Secure. And as we all know, network security is really important, especially in this time of cyber attacks are rising, getting more sophisticated. And on Azure, we offer cloud-native network security services for helping you to secure your network infrastructure and applications. And today we have I'm joined here with some great product experts across our network security portfolio. So I'll let them introduce themselves. First, we have Amir.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here, and thank you for joining. My name is Amir Dahan. I'm part of our DDoS product management team, and I'm really excited to take part in that session.
Hi, I'm Gunjan, and I'm very excited to join with Henry, Amir, and Gopi. I'm part of Azure Web Application Firewall, and I lead Azure WAF portfolio.
Hi, I'm Gopi Krishna Kannan. I'm PM lead in the Azure Firewall Manager team. I'm excited to be here and answer your questions.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And so just to start, I want to start with a few questions for everyone here that I hear a lot from customers and in conversations with customers. So Gopi, I'll start with you. Since you cover Azure Firewall. So we recently announced the basic SKU for Azure Firewall. So now we have basic, standard, and premium. And the basic is designed for SMBs specifically. So a more affordable price point, but still giving them the essential capabilities that they need to protect their network. So can you talk a little bit about what are the differences among these three Azure Firewall SKUs? And then as a customer, how would I choose which one is the best one for me?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So for those of you who don't know about Azure Firewall offers layer 3 to layer 7 network inspection and filtering. And it has built-in threat protection as well as IDPS. So we offer three SKUs. At the top end, we have what is known as a premium SKU, and this is targeted towards customers in high regulatory environments and compliance environments. And at the middle, we have the standard SKU. The standard SKU is targeted towards enterprise deployments. So as many of you, the enterprise environments are complicated because you have a hybrid network where you have to connect on-prem with Azure and do filtering as such. So for that, the standard SKU is the best because it offers built-in DNS capabilities, whether you want to connect to on-prem or to Azure DNS. It also has built-in threat protection as well as web category filtering. And at the entry level, we have the basic SKU, and the basic SKU offers, a firewall security, the layer 3 to layer 7, both inbound and outbound security at a affordable price. And this is recommended for customers who need no more than 250 Mbps throughput and have a low complexity setup. So that's like a good summary of all three SKUs.
Thanks, Gopi. Yeah, and I love that on Azure, you get that breadth of options. So regardless if you're a smaller customer just getting started in the cloud, or if you're a large enterprise, you have the options based on what you need from a security standpoint, and also meets the needs from a cost perspective. So Amir, another common question that I get asked a lot, or we hear from customers is, Azure provides a lot of security by default features that you get. So by default, we provide things like infrastructure level DDoS protection to protect, the Azure infrastructure against DDoS attacks. Does this also mean that, as a customer, all of my applications that are running on Azure are also protected by this infrastructure level DDoS protection?
Yes, essentially Azure DDoS protection was born to protect the Azure platform, and essentially Azure platform supports the majority of Microsoft online services, like, for example, LinkedIn, Xbox, and those other Microsoft online services are all protected with our Azure DDoS protection service. And the main purpose here is to ensure that the Azure platform is staying alive, stable at all times, and Azure DDoS protection makes sure that this happens. Now, the way we actually do it is we are protecting any resource running in Azure. It may be our first-party customers like Xbox, LinkedIn, etc., or customers running their applications. But the way we do it, the way we protect those resources is essentially making sure that when there is a DDoS attack targeting those resources, we make sure that there is no collateral damage. We want to make sure that the platform is up and running and the availability of the platform itself is not affected. And on top of that, we want to make sure that when a specific resource belonging to some customer running their application in Azure, when it is affected by DDoS attack, there is no collateral damage, namely no other customers are affected in the specific data center or region where the attacked application is running. So that's the prime objective of what we call infrastructure level protection, which is the basic free tier of our DDoS offering. But it doesn't serve well direct DDoS attacks on applications that are running by customers, because remember, we want to make sure that the platform is protected and there is no collateral damage. And the way we do that is by setting the detection policy quite high. So the detection triggers for DDoS attacks are very high. And when there are attacks that are targeting the application directly, those attacks will come below the radar, below the detection triggers that are part of the infrastructure level protection. And when those attacks are coming, you need to make sure that your DDoS protection policy is suited to protect your specific application that you run in Azure. In other words, you need to make sure that the DDoS protection policy kinds of fingerprinting the patterns of your specific application. And this is where our DDoS protection SKUs come into play, and customers that run applications in Azure should use our DDoS protection SKUs to protect their own applications. And this is our recommendation.
That's great. Thanks, Amir. And we know that we're seeing a rise in a lot of DDoS attacks, especially with things like hacktivism and nation state attacks. And I think we're also seeing a trend and a rise in web attacks, especially cyber criminals trying to steal sensitive data. And so I want to ask Gunjan as well, who covers Azure WAF. On Azure, we offer WAF, in two options, both at the regional level with your application gateway and then with your Azure front door. So, how would I choose between which WAF that I want to use, whether through the regional one or the global? Can you share more guidance there?
Yeah, good question, Henry. I think we do get this question asked a lot. So before I get into which one you choose, the one with the application gateway or Azure front door, so just to get an idea, the same thing that you're mentioning, we've seen so many web application attacks, right? So that's where the Azure WAF comes into play. It intercepts your request and looks for any vulnerabilities or security issues. So it protects your web applications that are hosted anywhere to look for any common patterns or CVEs, like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, or it could be security just misconfiguration, right? So it protects the web application, the API is hosted, and that's where Azure WAF comes in. And of course, like we talked about DDoS, where DDoS prevents you from massive L3, L4 kind of level attacks. Now, when you get Azure WAF, it does come in 2 deployment mode. That's one is with Azure Front Door, and second is Application Gateway. So let's talk about Azure Front Door, which is, we call it a global WAF. Think about Azure WAF. Azure Front Door is our CDN service, which is globally distributed. Basically, it serves, we have globally distributed hundreds of POP locations. So if you have a need for a web application with the CDN-like service for caching and acceleration, you go with CDN, all right, Azure Front Door. So this is where WAF attaches to. So if your application hosted needs caching, global acceleration with the web application protection, you deploy global WAF with Azure Front Door. But then there is a second deployment mode, which is with Application Gateway, and Application Gateway is a load balancer. It's a regional load balancer, and let's say your application is hosted on Azure data centers within the virtual network. So you have a private applications, you have public applications, and they're within the data centers. That's where the WAF attaches to. So this is a mode where you're deploying as a network virtual appliance, and your WAF attaches to Application Gateway. So if you need more globally distributed CDN-like service, then you use with the global WAF with Azure Front Door. But if you need something global load balancer for private application, public application within the VNet, then you go with Application Gateway WAF.
Awesome, thanks, Gunjan. So I see we have a few questions now from our audience. So I want to start first with a question from Richard, and I think Gopi, you might be able to cover this. So Richard's asking, when you combine Azure Network Security with an SD-WAN virtual appliance like a Azure Meraki, VMX firewall, and a VPN concentrator, are there any examples of this in the Microsoft documentation or best practices to keep in mind?
Yeah, so we have a product called Secure Hub. So Secure Hub is basically Azure vWAN, the Azure Virtual WAN, with the Azure Firewall built into it. And this is a very popular solution used by customers who are moving away from MPLS and building the WAN infrastructure on Azure. And it provides several capabilities. Given that the firewall is inside the vWAN hub, it can filter traffic from east, west, as well as north-south traffic. We support all 3 SKUs in a vWAN, which is basic SKU, the standard SKU, as well as the premium SKU. In addition to it, in a vWAN environment, we automate routing for traffic to flow, whether it's traffic coming from branch office going to a VNet, or from a VNet to another VNet, or a traffic going from a VNet or a branch office to the internet. All 3 are supported in the Secure Hub. In addition to it, like for customers looking for internet breakout through a more third-party firewall, like Zscaler and Checkpoint, we offer what is known as an internet breakout capability via a third-party provider, which is also popularly consumed within the context of the virtual WAN hub. And all of this documentation is available in the virtual WAN page. Search for virtual WAN page and Secure Hub, and there's best practices, recommendations, the ways to deploy, and use case and tutorials, which are all covered in great detail.
Awesome, thanks, Gopi. We also have another question, and so not sure if any, Gunjan, Amir, Gopi, if any of you have response to this, but the question is, what is Microsoft's pull in a product like Cisco, any connect in relation to Azure Network and security connectivity? Do any of you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, like, it's again in the context of a vWAN, we offer what is known as a point-to-site gateway. So it is popular for customers when they use a mobile client, whether it is a laptop, iOS or Windows or a mobile phone, to want to access enterprise resources. And in such cases, we have a point-to-site VPN client that you can deploy on the endpoint, which will route the traffic to the vWAN hub, and inside the vWAN hub, we have the Azure firewall, which will filter the traffic and give access to the resources, assuming it's allowed to access. So definitely request the customer to try out the point to site option, the VPN client that we have with the vWAN product.
Awesome. Thanks, Gopi. And we have another question, I think a great one from the audience around how should we think about integration of the various Defender products with our network security services? And one of the great things about Azure Network Security that the services are cloud native, right? So they have really great integration with a lot of our security services like Defender for Cloud and Sentinel. So Gunjan, maybe you can talk a little bit about, at least from your perspective on the WAF side, like how should someone think about how WAF integrates with something like Defender for Cloud?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So I think what makes us all just not the Azure WAF, these security products great, is the whole complete Microsoft ecosystem of security portfolio, right? So it's not just Defender products, Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Sentinel. All these products integrate very well. So they are complement each other. So for example, Azure WAF has a very tight integration with Sentinel where you can ingest logs and all telemetry into Sentinel and do all kinds of SIEM-based solutions. So Sentinel is a SIEM solution. And similarly, we do have integration with Microsoft Defender for Cloud, where you get the whole view of what is the security posture look like. So there's some integration that exists today, and there's definitely a lot of investments and work going on. How do we leverage all this whole ecosystem so you can get a complete security view of your whatever the security posture look like for the whole deployment? So with Azure WAF, whether you think about firewall and DDoS, they do integrate well. So there's some integration exists today, and there are many integrations and investments we're doing. Actually, we are working on right now.
On the data side, we as Gunjan mentioned, we also have integration with Microsoft Sentinel, as well as Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and we continuously working with the relevant product group teams from Defender for Cloud and Sentinel to enhance those integrations and make them even broader across the NetSec portfolio.
Yeah. And likewise on the firewall, right? Like it's very simple to connect your logs to Sentinel for threat hunting, as well as we have built-in capabilities for threat detection, things like port scanning, for example, and you can leverage the community-driven effort on top of Sentinel logs to have a good visibility into the different attacks that to monitor the different attacks and how it has been blocked. And we also have what is known as a secure score with Defender for Cloud, where you can basically get recommendations on the posture, the security posture, and then use the firewall manager to secure your environments, whether it is adding DDoS protection for your VNets or adding a WAF protection for your app gateway or front door or firewall security for your VNet or vWAN. All of these is possible within the single console of Firewall Manager.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And I think, Amir, one of the things I wanted to follow up with you, so similar to the firewall side where we launched a new SKU, a basic SKU for SMBs, we also did so for IP protection. SKU for DDoS designed for SMB. So, how similar question to ask Gopi is how, as a customer, how would I choose between those two SKUs and which one's the right fit for me?
Yes, sure. So up till now, we had what we call the DDoS network protection SKU, which is applicable to, I would say, enterprise type of customers, those large customers that have a lot of resources exposed to the internet and target for DDoS attacks. And with the new SKU called DDoS IP protection, we actually wanted to approach or to address the SMB, SMC market segment and essentially offer the same security level and security features, but to scale down the SKU so it is more cost effective for those smaller customers and those that don't need to deploy a lot of resources that are open to the internet. So what we have done with the new DDoS IP protection SKU is allow customers to select, to pick up those specific public IP resources they want to protect and enable DDoS protection only on those resources and pay per IP resource that they want to protect. So essentially, it's like, if you have like up to 15, that's more or less the break-even point. Up to 15 public IP resources, customers should opt for the DDoS IP protection SKU, and if they have more than that, they should go with the DDoS network protection SKU. The security features are the same. There are additional, I would say, value-added capabilities that distinguish network from IP protection, and those are along like 3 of them. The first one is what we call cost protection, is where DDoS network protection covers any cost incurred due to a DDoS attack, like auto-scaling, data egress, processing, etc. We have the DDoS rapid response that is available for the DDoS network protection SKU. And also, customers with app gateway running WAF are discounted if they use the DDoS network protection to get an end-to-end layer 3 to layer 7 protection for DDoS and application security that is obtained through the WAF on app gateway SKU. These are the 3 value-added capabilities that are offered only to DDoS network protection SKU and not to DDoS IP protection. But aside to that, all the security features are the same.
Yeah. Thanks, Amir. Yeah, no, it's great to, with that new SKU, customers have that flexibility to apply the protection on just, individual IPs. Because for, even smaller customers, they might be early on the cloud journey or have a smaller footprint. So, that flexibility helps them stay protected as well. And so, Gopi, I think a question probably that you might be able to answer. So if we're using the hub and spoke model, how many hubs should we have per region? Any tips to ensure backup in case of failure?
Okay, so that's a great question. You want to protect against failures and don't want to create a single point of failure. Now, hub and spoke model is the recommended architecture in Azure for you to scale out your deployments. And we have 2 types of hubs. Like I already said, there's a VNet. You could build hub and spoke model with your VNets, or you could build a hub and spoke model with your vWAN. In both these cases, right, there's no real constraints on how many hubs you can create within a single region. You can create as many as you want based on the limit for your subscriptions. But if you want to really tackle the high availability and the backup, when you deploy a firewall or any of the network resources, always deploy them with zonal redundancy. All of the network resources support zonal redundancy. So, for example, you could deploy Azure Firewall with 1, 2, 3 availability zone. And the recommendation is to use maximize and therefore use all the 3 zones. so that even if there is a failure in one zone, it doesn't impact the remaining, and you have business continuity. Likewise, if you're using an Azure policy, firewall policy, for example, we have automatic backup to a pad region. So if your policy is in East US, for example, it is automatically backed up to West US within the sovereign territory, and with that, even if East US has a problem and you are not able to, you can still continue to make changes to your firewall, because the ARM automatically routes to the next availability region and have your connectivity, your control plane activities intact. And if you just search for backup and disaster recovery in our public documentation, we have plenty of resources on best practices. WAF, that is a well-architectured framework, gives you real clear instructions on what are the best practices for performance, reliability, uptime, and security. So highly recommend that you follow the instructions given in the well-architected framework.
Awesome. Thanks, Gopi. Yeah, I think because we have a pretty tight schedule, so we'll kind of wrap up. I'll start with the panel here. So any kind of last thoughts that you want to leave with the audience? I'll start with you, Gunjan, and anything on the WAF side that you want to kind of share.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things we have seen a customer do, they use older version of rule sets. So I'll definitely recommend just going and start using the latest version, which is more secure and gives you more signatures and better protection. And don't leave them on detection mode. You do want to convert them to prevention, right? Detection is good for initial, but just to convert to prevention. So yeah, keep an eye, keep those firewalls up and secure your applications. So absolutely.
Thanks, Gunjan. Anything from you, Amir? Any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think that what's unique with the network security offerings is that they are actually complementary, right? And customers should embrace those, at least those three products we are discussing here, but obviously there are additional security products in Azure and Microsoft. And it's like, when they use them together, the benefit is even better. And the fact that we are talking about native services, the integration, configuration, monitoring, logging is much easier for customers to consume, and that's also a great benefit.
Thanks, Amir. And last but not least, Gopi, you want to take us away? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, so we are always available for to help you every step of the way when you're migrating your applications from your on-prem to Azure Firewall. And highly recommend that when you start this journey, go with the cloud architecture framework. It provides a ready template. The landing zones provide ready template for you to start with security built into your environments from day zero. And definitely recommend reaching out to us through support if you have any questions and further clarifications.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Gunjan, Amir, Gopi, for joining us today, and thanks everyone who participated and asked questions. We hope you had a good time and got your questions answered. Stay tuned. The next session is implementing Defender for Cloud, Microsoft's CNAPP to embed security from cloud code to cloud. And we hope you had a great time, and please fill out our survey so we can improve, for the next time as well. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.